I was astounded to learn that the Sunni Muhammadan scholars of Arabia teach their children in this 21st century that the earth is flat and that the moon landing is a great deception by the unbelievers. Is this true?
In the Quran, the word ilm, knowledge, has only one meaning: knowledge of religion and not of anything else. It is a deliberate lie when Muhammadans point out the word knowledge as pertaining to the sciences, arts, and independent thought. Muhammadan scholars have written an enormous number of books claiming that Muhammad was a super genius whose knowledge was stupendous and way ahead of its time. The following are a very small sample of verses and ahadith that show the true state of affairs, and it is left to the listener to evaluate the veracity or lack thereof of such claims. Surah Al-Hijr 15.19. And the earth we have spread out like a carpet, set thereon mountains firm and immovable. Al-Nahl 16.15. And he has set up on the earth mountains standing firm, lest it should shake with you. Al-Kahf 18.47. One day we shall remove the mountains, and thou shalt see the earth as a level stretch. That means that the earth is flat and the mountains are what hold it in stretch. 18.86. Until when he reached the setting of the sun, he found it set in a spring of murky water. Near it he found a people. We said, O Zulqarnain, thou hast authority either to punish them or to treat them with kindness. The sun, which is at least 1,000,000 times bigger than the earth, sets in a puddle of muddied water. Al-Anbiya 21.30. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together before we clove them asunder? We made from water every living thing. Neither in the Bible nor in biology is there such an absurd and unrealistic idea. Life, according to the theory of evolution, started in water and not from water. Surah Yasin 36.40. It is not permitted to the sun to catch up the moon, nor can the night outstrip the day. Al-Saffat 37.6. We have indeed decked the lower heavens with beauty in the stars. According to astronomy, there is no heaven, and the stars are definitely not for decorative purposes. Fussilat 41.12. So he completed them as 7 firmaments in 2 days, and he assigned to each heaven its duty and command. And we adorned the lower heaven with lights and provided it with guard. Neither the Bible, which is the source of this version of creation, nor astronomy mention any 7 heavens. Al-Abasa 80.17. From what stuff did he create man? From nutfa, male and female semen drops. He created him and set him in due proportion. Neither Muhammad nor the translators of this verse got it right, since the woman provides the ovum and not the semen drops. Sunan Abu Dawud Hadith 4705, narrated by Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib. I was sitting in Ba'tha with a company among whom the Apostle of Allah was sitting. He asked, do you know the distance between heaven and earth? They replied, we do not know. He then said, the distance between them is 71, 72, or 73 years. The heaven which is above, it is a similar distance. Above the 7th heaven there is a sea, the distance between whose surface and bottom is like that between one heaven and the next. Above that there are 8 mountain goats, the distance between whose hoofs and haunches is like the distance between one heaven and the next. Then Allah, the Blessed and the Exalted, is above that. Muhammad, being a cameleer, measured distances by time. That is, the time it takes him and his animal to get from point A to point B. He of course applies the same methodology to describe astronomical distances without qualifying the rate of speed. Moreover, according to all the knowledge that we have regarding astronomy and cosmology, Muhammad's concepts are, to put it mildly, ignorant, stupid, and infantile. Sunan Abu Dawud Hadith 5222, narrated by Buraidah ibn al-Hasib. I heard the Apostle of Allah say, a human being has 360 joints, for each of which he must give alms. Bukhari Hadith 1.510. Allah Apostle said, If it is very hot, the severity of the heat is from the raging of the hellfire. According to human anatomy, Muhammad is once again wrong. His obsession with hell is unrelenting and satanic, as revealed in so many verses of the Quran and Hadith. Bukhari Hadith 4.482. Allah Apostle said, the hellfire complained to its Lord, saying, O my Lord, my different parts are eating each other up. So he allowed it to take 2 breaths, one in winter, the other in summer. This is the reason for the severe heat and bitter cold you find in weather. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 4.430, narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud. Allah Apostle, the true and truly inspired, said, the matter of the creation of a human being is put together in the womb of the mother in 40 days. And then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period. And then a piece of flesh for a similar period. This is a gestation period of 3 months, which is of course contrary to biology. So much for Muhammad's knowledge and divine inspirations. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 4.494, narrated by Ibn Umar. Allah Apostle said, you should not seek to pray at sunrise or sunset, for the sun rises between 2 sides of the head of the devil or Satan. Excellent Muhammadan science of astronomy. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 4.537, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, if a housefly falls in the drink of any one of you, he should dip it in the drink, for one of its wings has a disease and the other has the cure for the disease. Muhammad's superb intellectual and hygienic analysis and conclusions are beyond measure. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 4.539, narrated by Abu Talha. The Prophet said, angels do not enter a house which has either a dog or a picture in it. Bukhari Hadith 4.546. Allah's Apostle said, Gabriel has just now told me of the answer. If a man has sexual intercourse with his wife and gets discharged first, the child will resemble him. And if the woman gets discharged first, the child will resemble her. Even the archangel of Allah is made to look profoundly stupid. Tabari 1.293. When Allah cast Adam down from a paradise, Adam's feet were on earth while his head was in heaven. Adam was not cast down from paradise. He was kicked out from the Garden of Eden, which was on earth and not in heaven. There are hundreds more of similar hadiths and Quranic verses, but I hope that the above are sufficient for the listeners to have learned a great deal of correct and truthful facts and knowledge from the mouth of Muhammad.
Almost every book, newspaper or thesis written by the scholars of Muhammadan Islam rebuke, defame and insult the West, especially for their imperialism and occupation of Arab and Muhammadan lands, but at the same time glorify their own conquests and find nothing hypocritical with such logic. What about their conquests?
You are absolutely right in labeling their behavior as hypocritical. I must point out to our listeners the following irrefutable facts. It was because of Western imperialism that Arab and Muhammadan lands were introduced to education, sanitation, electricity, running water, democracy, roads, trains, cars, planes, medicine, inoculation, etc., etc. It was also because of Western imperialism that the Arabs were liberated from the yoke of the Muhammadan Muslim Ottoman Empire, and 22 Arab countries that did not exist before were created. It was due to Western imperialism that these peoples rediscovered their past history due exclusively to the archaeological discoveries and research financed and conducted entirely by the West. Now let me compare these positive achievements of the West with what the Muhammadan Muslims contributed towards their conquered peoples and lands. Let us first set the record straight. The Arab conquests during and after the death of Muhammad were not only motivated by the desire to spread Islam, but mainly to acquire territory and wealth. In fact, the spread of Islam was just a byproduct of the conquests. As was true throughout human history, enormous wealth brought with it enormous power. Wealth and power are synonymous, but enormous power also engendered enormous corruption. The Arabs were just as greedy and just as weak as anyone else when faced between the choice of acquiring wealth or staying as good, observant, poor Muslims in the Arabian desert. The Arabs conquered and subjugated other peoples and lands and became just another imperialist power. The same modern Arabs and Muhammadans who condemn European and American imperialism have very conveniently forgotten their own conquests. Unlike all other imperial powers that have ceased to exist, Arab imperialism continues to this day, 1400 years later, in control and in subjugation of peoples and lands that never belonged to them except through conquest and enslavement. The speed with which the Arabs were able to conquer was astounding, and the main reason, especially in what we call today Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel and Egypt, was because most of these peoples welcomed them as would-be deliverers from the intolerance and subjugation of the Byzantine Christian Empire. Very few of the Arab victories would have been possible had the populace been hostile to them. It is the fact that the Arabs had absolutely no instruments of siege, nor were they adept at such warfare at the very beginning of their conquests. Muhammad started the Arabs on the path of imperialism from the time of the Hijrah in 622 CE with the following allegedly revealed verses. Al-Tawbah 9.5. But when the forbidden months are past, then fight and slay the pagans whenever you find them, and seize them, beleaguer them, and lie in wait for them in every stratagem of war. 9.29. Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which has been forbidden by Allah and His Apostle, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, Islam, even if they are of the people of the book, Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya, poll tax, with willing submission and feel themselves humiliated. Ali Imran 3.19. The religion before Allah is Islam, submission to His will. 3.85. If anyone desires a religion other than Islam, submission to Allah, never will it be accepted of him. Muhammad started his jihad, plunder and slaughter sanctified by Allah, first against his own tribe of the Quraysh, then followed with the forced conversion or destruction of other tribes, the Arabians, then the Arabian Jews and the Christians. Based upon the above alleged divine revelations, the forcibly converted, illiterate and uncivilized Arab Bedouins, led by the caliphs who succeeded Muhammad, conducted wars of extermination and or subjugation against all of humanity from Iraq and Syria to Iran, from India to China, from Egypt to the Atlantic, and from Cyprus to Italy, Spain and France. In about 100 years, the Arabs and their forced converts achieved an empire greater in size than that of Rome's of 1,000 years. This Arab empire caused the destruction, plunder of wealth and enslavement not only of millions of human beings, but also of temples, religions, civilizations, traditions, cultures, art and languages of the subjugated peoples and nations. The so-called Islamic arts were and are only copies of those of the Byzantine, Sassanid and Indian civilizations. The so-called Islamic civilization is a first-class misnomer, because in reality it should be called the Mawali civilization, since the Arabs had no civilization to contribute to the enslaved peoples. On the contrary, it was the subjugated civilizations that gave the Arabs the foundations upon which to continue, with fits and starts, and against all the Islamic Sharia laws and Arab traditions, on the path that led them to greater enlightenment. Converse to all the lies and propaganda of the Arabs, past and present. Most of the scientists and luminaries of Islam were actually from among the Mawali, the converted subjugated peoples of Islam, such as the Persians, Syrians, Jews, Christians, Hindus, etc., as the Islamic records themselves assert. Without a shadow of a doubt, Arab imperialism has been the most enduring, the most destructive, and the least useful in the history of the world. This assertion is based entirely on the following indisputable facts. 1. There was no Arab civilization in the area and era of Muhammad. His followers were mostly illiterate and very simple and superstitious nomadic and semi-nomadic people. 2. The Arabs conquered several of the most ancient and established civilizations in the world, plundered them, massacred many and enslaved and subjugated the remainder. This applies particularly to the Byzantine Empire, which fell more due to Christian infighting than to Arab military prowess. Arab and Islamic imperialism was so total that they forced the conquered peoples to convert to Muhammadan Islam, to lose their religious and cultural identities as well as their language. The Arabs could not and did not contribute anything to them. since they themselves were far inferior culturally, theologically, and intellectually. Arab imperialism, unlike that of the Persians, Greek, Romans, and the recent so-called Western imperialism, is almost totally parasitic. 3. Nearly 95% of all so-called Muslim scientists were from among the Mawalis, converts from among the conquered peoples, and not pure Arabs. All of them excelled not because of Muhammadan Islam, but in spite of it, and invariably during periods of history when the conditions were of toleration that allowed Christians, Jews, and others to contribute and cross-fertilize knowledge. It is a given that a human intellect can only thrive under conditions of freedom of thought and the ability to exchange ideas and communication. It can never excel under conditions of theocratic terror, as invariably exists under the Sharia law of Muhammadan Islam. 4. Most of the so-called Islamic science was only built upon the foundations of Greek, Roman, Hebrew, Byzantine, Persian, and Indian knowledge. And had it not been for the translations of these ideas and thoughts by Christians and Jews of the Arabian Empire, Islamic science would not have existed. In fact, nothing of value, intellectual, artistic, spiritual, or literary, can ever sprout in the darkness cast by fundamentalist Muhammadan Islam upon all the peoples and lands that it occupies. Ladies and gentlemen, the most perfect example of the fundamentalist Muhammadan state was that of the Taliban in Afghanistan, a nation of mind-boggling ignorance, of depraved injustice and inhumanity. Human intellect and achievements can only excel in the sunshine of freedoms of thought, religion, politics, literature, art, and expression, which Muhammadan Islam abhors, avoids, and detests.